What is up, guys? This is the Casual Wrestling Friday Night SmackDown Post Show for September 8th, 2023, coming to you every week after SmackDown. I am the Notorious NerdyD, and if you're listening, you are part of the CWC. Hit the like and subscribe buttons before you journey with me into my reactions of what we just saw tonight on SmackDown. Let's start out with the temperature check. So how are we all feeling about SmackDown right now? It feels to me like SmackDown is kind of the lost wrestling show right now. It's hard for me to get excited about a wrestling program when the champion is once again going MIA. Where's Roman? Someone tell me, where's Roman? We don't get a video package. We're not even really getting mention of him anymore. What we're getting now is just little teases of Paul Heyman, calling him on the cell phone. I get that the Bloodline stuff has got us through the last 3 years of wrestling, especially on Friday Night SmackDown. But a main roster professional wrestling show that only features one official SmackDown title on camera just feels a little bit odd to me at this point. Having said that SmackDown this week definitely felt like you could call it a little bit of a breath of fresh air in the fact that it really feels like we're starting to get a little bit of new story going on. We're seeing people like Jimmy Uso in singles matches. Definitely things we haven't seen, in a long time. So I guess it's worth talking about and jumping into the show and talking about the main event right off the bat. So it's interesting. On tonight's SmackDown, in order to talk about the main event, we're going to have to talk about kind of what happened in the meat of the show. And to sum that all up, with no real explanation, all of a sudden, after causing the ultimate demise of possibly the greatest faction of all time, the Bloodline, Jimmy Uso has turned his attention back to attempting to rejoin the group in the kind of the most dopey of ways. I think at this point, if it wasn't obvious enough already, that the last couple of weeks, it's become more painfully obvious, and tonight it was glaringly obvious. For 100%, Triple H is now winging this Bloodline story at this point. These plot points don't even connect anymore. These plot points wouldn't even make sense on a sci-fi channel, like original movie. And I'll be honest with you, I don't completely hate what Triple H is doing here. I just think that the problem is when you leave out so many plot points that kind of could get us to this outcome, you get us to our destination extremely fast, and you leave out the meat that really kind of tells the backstory. You could sell me on a storyline that Jimmy Uso is confused now that his brother has moved over to Monday Night Raw. I just need more context as to how Jimmy has come to this conclusion and how he struggled to find success as a solo star without his brother. We definitely could have used, 2 or 3 weeks of Jimmy Uso in different matches getting beat up by different superstars, guys like Theory, guys like LA Knight, and seeing him not find success without his brother or without Solo being there to help him out. For Jimmy to just show up on Friday Night SmackDown tonight and go, I want back in the Bloodline, it almost leads me to kind of take the feeling away that Jimmy Uso's character is now desperate and goofy instead of kind of the cool level-headed one that he typically was. It really felt like WWE had set both Usos on a path of like single superstardom after splitting away from the Bloodline. But you really have to start to wonder if WWE didn't see some kind of internal analytic, like a drop in ratings or a drop in merchandise sell that made Triple H go, we got to hit the panic button. We've got to get the Bloodline back together. I could see him looking at the SmackDown analytics and going, this is dropping. Without Roman, without the Bloodline, there's not a lot of interesting stuff going on here. I could also see him looking at merchandise and that weird kind of Triple H logic going, well, the reason that LA Knight, his merchandise is doing so well is because there isn't actually a Bloodline to sell merchandise anymore. And I could see that being a problem when you're kind of in the negotiation stage with Fox as far as TV deals go, and you're finishing up kind of the specifics of the Endeavor deal. I'm guessing that WWE is looking at their product and going, without a proper bloodline, this may not look as appealing to certain people that are literally just looking at the analytics. You know, I could see kind of the corporate types going, hey, yeah, that group that's been successful for the last 4 years, what are we doing with those guys? And it's a hard sell if you're WWE to go, oh, they don't really exist anymore in the form or fashion that they have in the last couple of years. And I could see Triple H hitting the panic button and going, we've got to reform a semblance of the Bloodline on SmackDown to sell more merchandise, to keep the TV ratings up. And I find it almost funny that some of the Bloodline merchandise, like the t-shirts this week, almost felt like product placement. It felt like they made reference to We the Ones to kind of remind fans that, like, oh no, that shirt is still prominent. You can still order that shirt and it'll make sense as far as the Bloodline goes. But there's a way that Triple H could have got us to where we are today that would have made much more sense. But I'm starting to understand and see the nuances of Triple H's booking. And one thing I'm starting to notice is Triple H doesn't mind kind of skipping the journey. He's kind of doing the season 8 Game of Thrones thing with his storytelling where, you know, this Bloodline thing has been really good up until this season 8, and now we're just going to kind of fast forward to get it where we think we need it to be without giving us any actual kind of context or backstory for side characters like Jimmy Uso, who could really, really benefit from 3 to 4 weeks of, like, hey, this story is now kind of the Jimmy story, and we're going to focus on him here. And instead, they just rush into Jimmy wants back in the Bloodline. They really could have built depth for Jimmy Uso by having him lose 3 big matches, having him look desperate. After those losses, turning to Paul Heyman and asking for advice, and Heyman turning him away and saying, hey, you're not part of the Bloodline. I can't talk to you anymore. And starting to see Jimmy Uso realize that all of the success he's found for the last 3 years was actually a product of Roman Reigns and was actually a product of the Bloodline. And maybe Roman's not the bad guy that we once thought he was. Now, there's a few things that are starting to worry me in the cracks of this Bloodline story. So it's become extremely apparent to me that they're putting the Jimmy Uso and Jey Uso match in their back pocket and they're waiting on that one. But doesn't it feel like the longer that we wait on that match and we let it cool off, the less interesting that match could become? I'm not saying that they can't re-spark some of those flames, but let's be honest, coming out of SummerSlam, the main event of WWE Payback should have been Jimmy Uso versus Jey Uso. That was the pinnacle of some of the Bloodline story, especially for some of those kind of, you know, lower mid-level characters inside the story. But instead, Triple H seems to want to pocket these kind of matches. And like I've said before, it feels like Triple H is kind of banking on the big 4. He's banking on saving this match 6 months from now for WrestleMania, and I don't know if Heat can last that long. I've said it over and over again. I think WWE has this tendency to let things cool off until they're not viable anymore, and then once they see they're not viable, they go, well, we don't even really need to finish that. But right now, we're talking about the main event of SmackDown here tonight, which was Jimmy Uso versus AJ Styles, who is seemingly now on a journey to getting rid of his faction finally, because, you know, that faction hasn't made sense for so long. That faction has been so confusing to me, even from kind of the jump of seeing them all together. They're never cohesive. They never work together. They never go to the ring with AJ Styles. They offer him zero support in matches. When you're in a main event match against Jimmy Uso and Paul Heyman and Solo Sikoa peek their heads out, that feels like the prime time that maybe the Good Brothers should just come out and check on AJ Styles. But instead, that's been a whole clusterfuck. It looks like they might be cleaning that up. It looks like AJ Styles might be turning heel. At least there was some semblance of, like, some life left in AJ Styles' character. But for a SmackDown main event, this wasn't groundbreaking. It was interesting. It was a fresh matchup. Both guys good in the ring. I think the ending was like a little bit of a head scratcher, having the Judgment Day come out and interact with the Bloodline and work with the Bloodline after they just, previously on the show said that the Bloodline were crumbling, or maybe that was Monday Night Raw, and then Bobby Lashley kind of reiterated that. It's all kind of weird. It all kind of felt to me like WWE just looking for like a storyline for everybody to talk about until Monday. It almost felt like to me that this SmackDown ultimately suffered from being an afterthought to the India show, and not having some of those, not having John Cena, not having some of those bigger kind of character beats that we've gotten used to the last couple weeks. And it really felt like this ending was kind of manufactured to make us go, here's something to talk about, here's something to talk about in the next couple of days until we get back to Monday Night Raw, where our roster is really kind of backloaded and full of our superstars. Like I said, I think it ultimately suffered from being an afterthought to the India show this week. The main event of SmackDown tonight was a 3.5 on the casual scale, so we'll round it down and we'll call it an okay main event this week. I thought the opening match was fun. I thought it was full of energy. Shotzi and Charlotte is kind of the oddest pairing of tag team that I've seen in a while, but I get it. It's a vehicle to get Charlotte on television. It's a vehicle to get Shotzi a little bit of momentum moving forward, someone who hasn't been pushed in a while. It's an effective way to push your underutilized talent, and so I like it. It had energy. It felt different. It was kind of a nice way to kick off SmackDown this week, but ultimately the real story is that this is setting up something bigger. Asuka stealing the title from Dakota Kai, then kind of dancing around the crowd. That was a fun touch. The wacky version of Asuka is the best form of Asuka. I don't like the kind of scary, tough Asuka. I don't like the overly babyface Asuka. I think the Asuka full of chaos is definitely the most fun version of Asuka to watch. I think that the stare down between IYo and Asuka finally made IYo feel a little bit interesting. When the show started and Damage Control was coming to the ring, I immediately wrote down in my notes a thought that I had that said, WWE's doing absolutely nothing for IYo with this title run. It's kind of a head scratcher to me that they're not doing anything with her. And then this segment kind of played out, and I immediately scratched that off of my notepad because I think they've set up a solid premium live event match at Fastlane between IYo Sky and Asuka. Because I don't suspect that the match we're getting on SmackDown, I don't know if it was this week or the following week, between IYo Sky and Asuka, that's not going to go smoothly as planned. That's not the end of this story. That's the beginning, and that's going to plant seeds. That's definitely a premium live event match that would do extremely well on a show like Fastlane. I think it's very well suited for a show that's not going to have a ton of firepower to put a match on the card that people might actually be excited about. Now, I thought Asuka's backstage promo in her native tongue, I thought that was dope, man. These kind of promos are growing on me. I think that I might have actually liked that better if they had left English completely out of it. There's this uncomfortableness when Asuka speaks English that really kind of dumbs down her character, and it's just a language barrier is all it is. And I don't understand why WWE can't just subtitle the basic meaning of these promos that these superstars cut in their native language. It doesn't even have to be a word-for-word translation, but more maybe just a general idea of what is being said. And I imagine that most of these promos are being pre-recorded anyway, so it feels like it's not a difficult thing to do to allow these superstars like IYo and Asuka to cut promos in their native language and be comfortable, but still for it to resonate with kind of the general audience. Loved everything about this. The opening match on the casual scale was probably a 3.8 out of 5. We always round down. So I thought it was a way better than okay, but not quite great way to open up SmackDown. I don't think the match delivered ultimately a great viewing experience. So it looks like Triple H decided to take my advice and squeeze that last little bit of singles juice out of Austin Theory and let LA Knight, beat up on him before he becomes an official tag team, wrestler. The promo went exactly as I called it last week. LA Knight runs circles around guys like Austin Theory. Look, LA Knight runs circle around guys like Grayson Waller. He showed them both what a superstar promo is tonight. Now, question for anybody listening, does anybody else get the feeling with the involvement of The Miz, Theory, and Grayson Waller, does anybody get the feeling that there could be a hell of a faction with The Miz taking on Theory and Waller and like almost training them to be better heels and kind of letting that play out almost like the Damian Sandow protege thing, but less comical and more like The Miz grooming the next versions of himself, and those guys becoming almost competitive for The Miz's attention. I think there's a storyline there happening, and I think WWE should kind of explore and see what they get with The Miz, Theory, and Grayson Waller. Now, it appears we're going to get round 2 of The Miz and LA Knight, which is completely fine. I'm not going to complain about more of a good thing. That perfectly fine with that. I will say, though, that LA Knight appears to be getting more comfortable every week in the ring as far as like wrestling goes. I thought his X's and O wrestling looked a lot smoother from a casual set of eyes. It just looks like the transitions between moves is clean. It looked like he transitioned into his finisher nice this week. So it does feel like he's kind of finding his footing as far as like the wrestling side goes, which I think can be difficult when you don't get as much screen time and don't get as much time to wrestle. He's now on a weekly basis getting the opportunity to get in the ring and kind of show what he can do. But the word on the street is that LA Knight signed a long-term contract extension and that the big push is now headed his way. And I will say the big knock on LA Knight in the past has been that he's 40 years old. But let's be real honest. When he's standing in that ring with Austin Theory, LA Knight does not look and does not move like your typical 40-year-old wrestler in a ring. So LA Knight versus Theory, I give it a 4 on the casual scale just because I thought that the promo LA Knight cut that kind of electrified the crowd. I thought it was back to the clean kind of pure LA Knight form of promo. I think you can tell that when LA Knight is cutting a promo where he's able to really kind of script and mold it before he gets out to the ring, he is more comfortable and more effective rather than when you put him in the ring one-on-one with a guy like The Miz and force him to kind of do that battle rapper style of promo. I think he's fully capable of it. I just think he needs more of that to kind of build the confidence. But when LA Knight gets to come out and kind of cut that scripted promo, there's nobody better in the WWE right now. And just to kind of tie this up with a pretty bow, the tease of LA Knight and Paul Heyman's interaction was a pleasant surprise. I thought what Triple H did good tonight, or whoever was booking the show, we focused on pretty much 4 storylines and we gave them room to breathe. And there were multiple segments that featured the same talent and kind of gave us branching possibilities and branching story arcs, which is something that, the WWE has been pretty linear in the last couple months. So to see kind of branching story arcs and the possibility of, hey, we could do LA Knight versus Roman Reigns at some point based on this interaction, and I'm all for it. I think it would be fun to see LA Knight attempt to take the tribal chief out, even if it meant kind of helping the story of the reforming of the bloodline and bringing them together. If it took someone like LA Knight to do that, I would be interested in even seeing him fail to win that title. So after that, we got the Brawling Brutes versus the Judgment Day. And I will tell you, this match was a direct admission by WWE that there is a roster imbalance, particularly on SmackDown. I know that the tag team champions have a duty to work both shows, which is fine. And I mean, there's a way to fix that, Triple H. If you're not ready for that conversation, but if you just split the tag team title belts up, we wouldn't have to, have the Judgment Day traveling back and forth. But this match was honestly like a Judgment Day appearance match. The Brawling Brutes without Sheamus, they're not appealing. They're not that fun to watch. Ridge Holland telling the Judgment Day that he has broken fellas like them felt like it was a personal threat because of the people that he's injured in the ring. This is another one of those matches and another one of those moments for me in storytelling where Triple H misses the opportunity to give more context to what the significance of this match actually was and why it was taking place. I think that most casual fans will completely miss the fact that, hey, we're in Boston. Boston has a high Irish population. The Brawling Brutes are kind of a Irish-based faction. Finn Balor is an Irish wrestler, so this is a very Boston-friendly match. I don't think that WWE does a good enough job of kind of beating that home and giving us context as casual fans as this is why this match is happening tonight. But this was another one of those matches that kind of had quite a bit of splintering in the storyline, which I'll admit, once again, I like. I like this idea that these stories can go in multiple directions. We saw the Brawling Brutes get a loss. We saw the Judgment Day look strong as a team. We saw the return of Pretty Deadly in the back watching the television. Even if they're in a wheelchair, I'm sure they will be entertaining. It's not like wheelchairs have never been funny inside of WWE. And we ended the match with the Street Profits and Bobby Lashley getting in the face of the Judgment Day and setting up a tease for a future program between the two of them. I said it last week, and I'll say it again here tonight. The Judgment Day have so many opportunities for different stories that I love the unpredictability of the way they're being booked. This match was probably a 3 out of 5 by itself, but if you add in all of kind of the key story elements that happened, you add in getting to see Pretty Deadly, you add in the Street Profits and Bobby Lashley, I think that this ultimately was probably a 4 out of 5. And just kind of a side note thought that kind of hit me when I was watching and I jotted it down, there could be a fun little element at play here for Survivor Series. If this year we don't just do 2 teams versus each other, what if this year at Survivor Series we set something up that was faction based and we had like a tournament of the factions or something to kind of that extent with like the Brawling Brutes, the Judgment Day, Street Business, the Bloodline. I'm just saying that like all the seeds have been planted if that's something WWE would want to play with. So here in the casual community, we like to recognize the matches in the WWE that stood out just a little bit above the rest. So each and every week, we give out our casual wrestling awards for Match of the Night and Superstar of the Night. Tonight's Match of the Night was a little bit tough. There was only 4 like real wrestling matches tonight, so there wasn't a lot to choose from. And I ultimately think you could probably give this award to 3 different matches tonight, but I settled on giving this to the opening match between Charlotte, Shotzi, and Damage Control, only because I think I ultimately love what it ended up setting up with the stare down between IYo and Asuka. So I think that I'm cheating and giving it to the whole kind of opening segment, but I think that is going to be my match of the night for tonight. Superstar of the night is LA Knight. I think that's a pretty safe and simple decision. He held it down once again. He dropped another prime LA Knight promo. He looked efficient and much better as a wrestler in his match, and I think the crowd is still going crazy for him. So pretty simple to give Superstar of the Night to LA Knight this week. And finally, the final score for tonight's Friday Night SmackDown. Here at the Casual Wrestling Community, we have created a balanced 5-point rating system to ensure that all content is rated in a casual and cool system, with that being 5, an amazing show, 4, a great show, 3, an okay show, 2, a bad show, and 1, a terrible show. Tonight's Friday Night SmackDown was a 3.825, very close to being a great SmackDown, but ultimately falling just short of being great. I think this was a better than okay SmackDown, but not quite a great SmackDown, so we'll call it like a very okay Friday Night SmackDown. So let's end the episode by talking about any news we might have missed this week. Did catch an article that said Cardi B wants to be a part of WrestleMania 40. I am 100% for this. I am all for keeping this Chelsea Green storyline going as long as possible, where she keeps having to switch out tag team partners. I said it on the Raw Post Show that it should get to a point where she switched out tag team, champion partners so many times that nobody wants to partner with her because they believe a curse is real. And a couple weeks before WrestleMania, Cardi B should show up, volunteer to be Chelsea Green's partner. They should defend the title a couple weeks and ultimately have a big match at WrestleMania where Cardi B is a celebrity, kind of a celebrity guest. And then they should drop the titles the following Monday on that big Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania. But Cardi B's fun. I think she would make a fun character within the WWE Universe. So I'm all for this. I think she would fit right in with Chelsea Green. I think WWE could definitely find a way to make that work. I caught a news article that said the out-of-character cancellation fuels speculation about WWE SmackDown's future. Now, if you don't know, Out of Character is a Ryan Satin podcast that was featured on Fox, and Dave Meltzer reported that it was canceled. This is another Dave Meltzer hit piece. Ryan came out and said that his contract wasn't renewed, that the show actually wasn't canceled. And I think with WWE and Endeavor finishing up their deal, all these panic articles about like television deals by Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez, they're just stupid. I imagine that Endeavor has all the relationships that they need with large television networks that would love the opportunity to have SmackDown on their channel. I think Disney, FX, ESPN, they're all going to be at play when this really becomes kind of a talking point. I imagine that even Endeavor, if SmackDown was really in trouble, they could find a way to package it with Monday Night Raw or with UFC content. So there's ultimately no worry there. I don't think you can base that off of a podcast being canceled. To be real honest with you, I don't even know much about that podcast. I would venture to say that most casual SmackDown watchers have no idea that show even exists, and that's not a knock on. It's a huge show. I'm just saying that I think in general it's not kind of a core piece of the WWE content. But these articles are silly. The television contracts don't end until 2024. There's plenty of time to find a home for SmackDown. And I don't think the cancellation of a podcast is any indication of like what a network is doing on a larger scale. But just one last note is the problem with Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez and all these wrestling kind of dirt sheet reporters, they're basically just running a rumor mill of like circle jerk reporting on wrestling news that we get as wrestling fans, and it's all just bullshit, right? They co-sign each other on every fucking story, then they try to give each other credibility. After the story kind of falls apart, they just write a new article the next week that directly contradicts the last article that they wrote. They never acknowledge the last article. They never admit they're wrong, and they just kind of cover all their kind of clickbait basis. And so I've stopped looking at anything that Dave Meltzer or Brian Alvarez says, unless it's just to make fun of it and acknowledge how absolutely stupid that the things they're saying are. But there you have it. This has been the Casual Wrestling Friday Night SmackDown Post Show for the week. Make sure to check out the Casual Wrestling Podcast on Wednesdays here on YouTube and podcast networks, the Raw Post Show on Monday nights, and the Champ and the Chick that post every Monday afternoon. That is me and Level Up Lauren doing some stupid fun wrestling games. Do me a favor, hit that like button on this video, and let me know what you thought of Friday Night SmackDown in the comments. Until next time, stay casual, and I'm tapping out.
Step in the ring, if you ready, let's go. Ay, casual wrestling community show. You already know, talking WWE. Keep it rolling and hosted by Notorious NerdyD. Dope show that you gon' find. Tune in cause it's online. Hit 'em with a figure 4 leg lock, power driver or clothesline. We bringing that heat like for show.